Unit 7 focuses on cognition, language, thought, and memory. The memory portion of this unit is very broad, and because of that, it's divided up into two parts. This lesson, we will look at retrieval cues as defined up at the very top of the sheet, search terms used for activating memory. Many of these are things that we use all the time and probably did not realize that there's a term that goes along with it. We'll also look at forms of forgetfulness, and then kind of reverse engineering the process at the end, how we can use some of the techniques described in this unit to maybe have a better memory and a better recall of events. Okay, but retrieval cues. The first of these retrieval cues is priming. Memory pulled from a web of associations. So examples of this would be like playing charades or taboo, but charades is perhaps the best example of this. If I wanted you to tell me who the first president of the United States was, okay, but I'm not going to tell you the person's name. I want you to tell me the person's name. Okay, and I might tell you, maybe some of his battles, maybe his position in the military, in the French and Indian War, as well as the Revolutionary War, maybe mention some of his cabinet members, okay, everything except giving you the name. Okay, hoping that one of the things that I say is going to trigger that memory. Oh, George Washington. Okay, that's what priming is. Teachers use this all the time. Okay, and similarly when you go through like a multiple choice question, maybe there's something that happens to be in that question. Maybe it's in bold, maybe it's in italics, or maybe it's just the way that it's worded, but there's something in that question that hooks you. Okay, the next one. Okay, priming is very similar to charades. That would be an example. Setting context. Encoding specificity. Setting will trigger memory, aka context effect. Now this will seem very, very silly. This will probably be one of the most extreme examples that I've ever run across. Scuba divers recall more words underwater if they learn the list underwater, while they recall more words on land if they learned the list on land. Okay, presumably somebody took the time to go that far with it, but as encoding specificity, context effect, as this works, if you study something at home, that's where your recall of the information will be best. If you learned it in the classroom, that's where your recall will be the best. Something about that environment, okay, maybe the people that are there, maybe the geography, maybe the lighting. I mean, any and all of those things on a sensory level act as kind of a memory trigger. Okay, the next two of these are recall and recognition. Okay, and these are ways, retrieval cues. One is a little easier than the other. Recognition, you're just looking for what's familiar. Okay, recall on the other hand, and an example of recognition would be multiple choice, a police lineup. Okay, most students, come test time, they prefer multiple choice because the answer's there. Okay, you will have either 3 or 4 bogus answers, but the right one's there, and you don't need to know the whole answer. You just need to know or be familiar with a portion of it. Oh, that sounds like the answer. That's the one I'm going to go with. Recognition memory is very fleeting. They suggest that if you truly know the information, and if it's recognition based, if you truly know what you're talking about, what you're doing, recognition should be within just a few seconds. If you're spending any longer than that, it may be mistaken for you being careful, but you're probably dithering between 2 or 3 answers. Recall, on the other hand, you have to reproduce it exactly. You either know it or you don't. And an essay test, a short answer test, a free response would be an example of recall. Now, of course, between the two, students always go the recognition, team recognition, team multiple choice. Recall, on the other hand, if you truly know it, if you truly know what you're talking about, recall is kind of your chance, your time to shine, if you know what you're talking about. If you don't, then alphabet soup multiple choice, that's probably the way to go. All right, the next of these is emotion. Now, there's quite a bit to put in with emotion. It's worth noting that with emotion, emotional information is stored. It's much more memorable because it's stored in multiple parts of the brain. All right, mood congruent memory. And most of you probably know this from or have experienced this when you're in a bad mood, but whatever emotional state you're in, that seems to trigger other negative. This is oftentimes negative, but it oftentimes triggers other negative memories. All right, so even though this is the OG Spider-Man, but goes to the store, sees Uncle Ben's rice, and then suddenly he's ugly crying Tobey Maguire. Okay, but emotional states, if you're in a good mood, good memories. If you're in a bad mood, bad memories. Okay, stress-related neurotransmitters. Stress can help and hurt memory. Okay, it helps memory because whatever the stressor is, that's the only thing that's on your mind. That is the task at hand. However, it hurts memory because that's the only thing that you're focused on. That's the only thing that your mind is on. If you're overly stressed, if it's school-related, if it's home-related, if it's relationship-related, if it is involving friends, your social network of some kind, neurotransmitters connected with this would be cortisol and norepinephrine, both of which are stimulants. And when you are stressed, okay, these are meant to key you up and get you going and focused on the task at hand. Generally, when you're stressed, okay, you have tunnel vision. You can only focus on whatever the stressor happens to be. Oh, also acetylcholine or ACH. Those are the stress-related neurotransmitters. And they are also keenly connected with memory as well. All right, last of these is flashbulb memory. Flashbulb memories are emotionally charged, heavily charged, vivid, super vivid, like it just happened yesterday memories. Now, these are some examples, and should probably update the list a little bit, but there's a very good chance that some of you in the listening audience probably have your own personal flashbulb memories. They are so vivid, and again, just like it happened yesterday, although it could have been 10 years ago, but you remember it just like that. What you were wearing, the sights, the smells, the feelings, okay? I mean, that's what distinguishes a flashbulb memory from your regular run-of-the-mill memories. But these at the bottom, these are more of like a collective type of flashbulb set of memories. People who were alive at the time or when JFK was assassinated can probably tell you exactly what they were doing when they found out that the president had been shot. Okay, my mother, for example, she remembers in her either kindergarten or first grade classroom. My memory's off on it, but as she relayed this story to me, she remembers a lot of her elementary school teachers running out in the hallway crying. Also, school was let out early that day, and she was a Roanoke County kid. Of course, back in 1963, 9/11. Now, at this time, 9/11 is before any of you all were born. But 9/11 at Patrick Henry, 9/11/2001, was a B-Day. And I remember quite a few details. I remember by my last block class on that date, 2001, most of my class was gone as their parents had checked them all out early. Okay, I mean, America was under attack. Okay, that day, most people had no idea how bad this thing actually was. Vortex shooting, Sandy Hook shooting, okay, inaugurations of certain presidents, okay, I mean, these, again, emotionally vivid, I mean, just like it happened yesterday. All right, we go from how we are able to pull memories and make them accessible, but why do we forget? Okay, memory, it defines our life, but sometimes it could be our worst enemy. Okay, and we'll look at each one of these. All of them serve a larger purpose in the long run. Okay, I mean, I think all of us at some point in time wish we probably could have had a better memory. Okay, that, you studied, and I guess I wasted my time because I can't remember any of it. Okay, but there's a reason why your brain is set up to make room for extra memories. All right, but the first of these is called transience. Transience is the first sin, if you will, of forgetfulness. But if you don't use information, you will lose it over time. Memory fades with time. If you don't use it, you lose it. And from a survival standpoint, it certainly makes space for new information. But imagine a really, really rotten day. After a while, some of the thornier aspects of that some of the rougher edges will smooth themselves out after a while. You'll forget some of the details. And this Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, they have kind of outlined how this works. Fading of a memory if it is not used. Okay, this right here represents like a second after it happens. Your recall would be perfect. Okay, within moments of the event happening, of course your recall would be perfect. But if you don't use information, note how this Ebbinghaus forgetting curve works. There is a very, very steep drop-off. Okay, you lose a lot of information very quickly. Okay, but then it levels out. You will still remember something. Days, weeks, months, years, decades later, you will still remember something, but your detail isn't going to be what it once was the first day out of class. Okay, at this point, I can tell you who some of my elementary school teachers are, but I can't tell you all of them. Okay, I've not been at that elementary school, Fairview or Westside Elementary now, for well over 30 plus years. I don't remember who my principal was any of the time I was there, but I do remember some details. All right, and this forgetting curve, perhaps the best example of this is if you have been out of a foreign language for a while. That is perhaps one of the best examples. Okay, most people, they put their time in. Maybe it's 2 years of 2, maybe it's 3 of 1, and then they're out. They're done. Okay, there is, going back to this right here, if you made it all the way up to Spanish 3 or 4, or maybe you went for the Olympic gold. All right, 5 years of Espanol. Okay, and then you walked from it and you haven't used it. You will forget a lot. Okay, no matter how much or how little you took in, you will forget a lot. But you'll still remember something. People are very quick to say, oh, I don't remember anything. Okay, but you can still drop maybe 1 or 2 French words or Spanish words, even years later, and they'll still remember. All right, absent-mindedness is the next one. Absent-mindedness is forgetting because you just weren't paying attention. Your mind was on something else. Okay, so you forgot where you parked, lost your keys. You don't know where your phone is. That's perhaps one of the best examples. Okay, maybe you looked everywhere for your phone and probably very quick to pin the blame on somebody in the family. All right, who messed with my stuff? And then maybe your phone, you left it in the refrigerator, you left it in the microwave, you left it in the oven, you left it on top of your car. Okay, but wherever you left it, at that moment, your mind was on something else. Because if your mind was on your phone, you'd still have it. If your mind was on where you parked, you'd know where you parked. If your mind was on your keys, you'd know that they were in your back pocket. Okay, your mind was on something else. All right, now this gets a little confusing. Blocking. Okay, when either new information blocks an old memory or an old memory blocks the recall of a new memory. This is kind of tricky. At least the way that this is set up. This is very tricky. When new information blocks memories, it is retroactive interference. New information, new memories block old. New blocks old. So you learn, new school year, new teachers, and maybe you forget one of your old teachers. New blocks old. Okay, you're moving forward. Okay, so driving an automatic after driving a manual. Okay, maybe not the best example. Okay, but you learn something new and it's preventing you to remembering something old. When an old memory blocks the recall of a new memory. So old blocks new is proactive interference. So the example I have here at the bottom, calling me by your last teacher's name. So you roll in and whoever your previous block teacher was, you call me Mr. or Miss So-and-so, that person was on your mind. Old memory blocking a new memory. All right, types of retrieval failure. Okay, again, going along with proactive and retroactive interference. Okay, if you look at the graphic, assume that they're boyfriend, girlfriend, and if you call your new girlfriend your old girlfriend's name, okay, so old blocks new, proactive, okay, and assuming that you ever actually had a locker and actually used it, okay, when you finally remember this year's combination, you forgot last year's combination. Would be retroactive interference. Or maybe you got a new number, a new phone number, and you can't remember your old one. Again, retroactive interference. Now, these are very confusing pairs. I can guarantee you, I don't know exactly the full-fledged, full rollout of what your AP test will look like in the spring, but if it is multiple choice, I can guarantee you at least one or two questions related with proactive and retroactive interference. So if you notice the pairings, this is a mnemonic to help with it. Okay, but note the way that they are paired up. Proactive, old blocks. RN, new blocks, porn. Good way to remember it. Okay, so you learn the tango and you forget the mambo that you learned last year. So this would be new, and that's old. New blocks would be retroactive. New information prevents the retrieval of old. New blocks old. Again, that is retroactive. All right. Tendency of prior learning to inhibit recall of later. So old blocks new. That would be proactive. Okay. The next one is the serial position effect. The serial position effect, simply put, we remember the beginning, primacy. We remember the end, recency. But it's the stuff in the middle. The devil is indeed in the details. You forget the material in the middle, but you remember the beginning and the end. That's what the serial position effect is all about. And perhaps one of the best examples of this, of the 46 individuals who have occupied the Oval Office, and this would be really, really well done, would be perfectly illustrated if I had you all in class. But everybody knows who the first couple presidents are, and everybody knows who the most recent ones were. Okay, but the ones that are in the middle are like, huh, we had a president named Garfield? What, we had Grover Cleveland? He's on the list twice? What the heck? All right, but again, primacy, the ones at the beginning, George Washington, Adams, Jefferson. And the more recent ones, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden. Okay, but somewhere in the middle, our details get a little hazy. Now note that there are some bumps in the radar. Okay, some little hiccups there. So that might be where, oh yeah, Lincoln, he's number 16. Oh, Franklin Roosevelt. Okay, yeah, he was elected 4 times. And then you forget who comes after him or something like that. Misattribution. Misattribution is false memory on the part of the person. You don't remember the information correctly. Okay, everybody's been guilty of this at one time or another, and certainly social media, oftentimes we will point this sort of stuff out in other people, but maybe you just didn't have all the information. Maybe you only saw one part of the fight. You didn't know everything that was going on. Or maybe you just didn't like the person and you're just viewing everything that they did negatively. Okay, but misattribution is when you just don't remember it correctly. Now, the last part of this, misinformation and suggestibility, this is awesome. Okay, we fall victim to it all the time. The media definitely makes good strategic use of this. Social media probably exponentially increases this effect. Okay, but just a brief clip. Okay, you were witness to a car crash. Okay, if you were watching the screen, you saw 2 cars head-on collision. So, if I were to ask you 1 week later, and this is what misinformation, what suggestibility is, and think how mass media uses this, how social media definitely uses this. Group A, 1 week later. How fast were the cars going when they hit each other? Group B, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? Now, I'm basically asking the same thing, but the verbiage is different. Hit versus smash. Okay, clearly there it is a fender bender. Okay, there is significant damage that is done to both cars, but a week removed. So you're not going to remember everything. I mean, all the details, you're removed from the scene of the accident. Okay, but then asking the hit group, how much glass do you remember seeing? Okay, now you would expect some broken glass, to be on the ground if there was a head-on collision. Okay, and indeed, Group A did report seeing broken glass. But the smash group, okay, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other, and how much glass do you remember seeing? They reported seeing more glass everywhere than the hit group. All because of the terminology, all because of the way that the statement was phrased. Misinformation suggestibility. In historical scenes, most of you would be very quick to point this out as the Boston Massacre, but it was only the Boston Massacre because Paul Revere wanted people to know that it was a massacre. Okay, it's interesting to note that the soldiers that were responsible for this, all of them were acquitted, every last one of them. It was proven in a court of law that the soldiers were acting in self-defense, but you would not know that by looking at this painting. This painting shows and reveals quite a bit of bias on the part of Paul Revere, a patriot. For in this painting, it appears that the soldiers are in formation. Okay, and Captain Preston looks like he is just giving the order to fire. Okay, he's where he should be if he's giving such an order. Okay, but Captain Preston was not behind his men. He was actually in front of his men, ordering them not to fire, urging them to show hesitancy. Okay, but then over here, the colonists, they appear to be innocent. Okay, but what the artist, what the drawing, what the sketch is leaving out, the snowballs that were thrown, the insults that were thrown. All right, the colonists, they brought it on themselves. But I mentioned also that in recent politics, definitely, depending on your news outlet, you can kind of see the bias and how the bias definitely alters the types of facts that you're privy to. For example, you're just looking at number 44 when he was in the Oval Office. Okay, the picture up at the top versus the picture that's at the bottom. Okay, depending on the news outlet, you can pretty much guess which one would go with this image here at the bottom as maybe a lead image and tag that onto a story. And maybe a more liberal outlet would have made better use of this one up at the top. Okay, and these images. Okay, I mean, if you catch anybody mid-sentence, they're always going to be having a silly look on their face. And if it is the stated objective of your news outlet, your news organization, to either build up your candidate or tear down the candidate, then what kind of arsenal are you using? What kind of information, what kind of images are you linking with that news article? And the one just booted out of office. Okay, I mean, image is everything. And you can guess the political leanings of those that use some of these images. I mean, you have a field day with some of these. And I don't have any for Joe Biden, but AOC, I mean, she, depending on the news source that you're getting information from, she's either seen as the greatest thing ever or just completely ridiculed. And the images that usually go along with it will supplement that. Okay, but keep that in mind, whether it is a news source that you're getting your information from, or whether it's social media. Where's the bias? Okay, because they want to put an idea. I mean, that is the stated objective of I mean, you'd think ideally that any and all news organizations would be completely objective, but that is not always the case. There is an agenda, and the agenda you can read between the lines, either with the article or the pictures that go with it. Anyway, memory techniques. Okay, so we've now looked at retrieval cues. We've now looked at why we forget. So how can we make our memory better? Okay, there are some techniques that essentially reverse the process. Okay, so we've seen up to this point the things that make memories stick, why we sometimes forget. And to be cognizant of that, maybe you would be less likely to fall victim to some of these issues in the future. All right, in most cases, encoding is automatic and happens without our awareness. Okay, now what's meant by that up at the top? You didn't have to make flashcards to remember what you had for breakfast this morning. Okay, you did it, you were there, you know it. Okay, other encoding requires more effort, deliberate encoding called elaboration to make the memory useful. Okay, if only those parts of the brain were as easy to remember as what you had for breakfast this morning. If you work in this new information and connect it to older information, then you are practicing assimilation. And that in itself also helps with memorization. If you're building on a foundation that's already there as opposed to starting from scratch. But the first of these is, the first one's already written in for you, maintenance rehearsal. You just say it over and over again. Okay, and that'll work to a point. Okay, but low C, for those that consider themselves to be memory champs, this is the technique of choice. Low C means place, and you would use a familiar route to help you remember. Now, seems kind of counterintuitive if there's something that you need to memorize that you're adding memory on top of memory. Okay, so the example over here, while this is a lame one, okay, you're trying to remember the phone number and you're linking it with maybe a route, a familiar trek that you would take. Beginning of the trail, baseball field, big tree, soccer field, farm, church, and the end of the trail. Okay, that's a little on the lame side, but what they would encourage you to do if it was parts of the brain. There were 13 key parts that you had to know. So, if you were to use famous landmarks around Roanoke, okay, where would the hippocampus be? I mean, ideally, you should already know your way around Roanoke. You should have some sort of mental map of Roanoke. So that part's already taken care of. Or maybe Roanoke, maybe that's too large. Maybe your house. Okay, so hypothalamus maybe, as its hunger, thirst, and body temperature. Maybe you're envisioning your refrigerator. Okay, if it's hippocampus, maybe it's maybe a thumb drive that's beside your computer. Okay, if it's the ponds, obviously your bed. Okay, but as in your mind, as you're walking through that, you would remember these things. So they say. This guy, he takes it to the extreme.
The 2009 USA Memory Champion and record holder for most numbers memorized in 5 minutes, fastest to memorize a deck of cards. Whenever I go to a city, I will number the major landmarks, create a mental map in my head. Here in Paris today, I have numbered the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, Napoleon's Tomb, the Notre Dame Cathedral, the Champs-Élysées. I've numbered 50 items in the city of Paris, and I'm going to memorize these forwards and backwards so well that I'll know what the number 30 item is, what the number 12 item is, and what the number 1 item is. I want you to do the same thing in your city or your town, number 25 to 50 major landmarks.
Okay, and again, 20 to 50 landmarks in Roanoke. Well, we live in Roanoke, so that's kind of hard to do. But a list of 5. Okay, certainly the Star, the school, maybe the library, the Civic Center, one of the malls. Okay, and then from there, whatever you're trying to remember, you would place it in that mental map. And here's this guy in action.
If I met you, if I did not meet you, do not stand up. This isn't beat up the memory guy time, all right? Okay? However, if before the meeting today I said, hi, my name's Ron, and you said, my name's Garson, if we went through that drill, could you please stand up? Okay, never mind. Sit down. I'm going to do it. I'm just kidding. All right, guys, and I may not get this perfect, but in the spirit of Mary Kay, in the spirit of Rita Tarbutt, I'm going to give this a try. Whenever I call off your name, have a seat. Whenever I call off your name, sit down. So that means Kathy, you can sit down. Heidi, you can sit down. Dawn, you can sit down. Robin, you can sit down. Garson and Michelle and Allison and Linda. And Davey, you can sit down. Catherine and Rita and April and Mark and Kim and Yvonne and Winnie and Kim and Jonathan and Clara and...
All right, and that's good enough for this. I think you get the point. He goes through it. He goes through it pretty well. Now, you might say a big deal, so what? But at a Mary Kay convention, if you're trying to seal the deal, and I think we've all been there at some point in time or another, where you can remember you literally just met somebody, okay? Or maybe you've known them your entire life, and you can tell them you know every single detail about this person, and you want to introduce them to somebody else, and you can't remember their name. For some reason, for the life of you, you cannot remember their name. Okay, you know exactly where they live, you know their phone number, you know who their third grade teacher was, but you, for the love of God, cannot remember their name. Or you just met somebody, they told you their name, and you can't remember it. Okay, well, that's rather embarrassing if you have to keep going back because you can't remember their name. Remembering a person's name is very, very powerful, very helpful, and lucrative in the business world. And the last of these is natural language mediators. Natural language mediators are songs and rhymes. We probably do these more often than not. Low C, maybe that's kind of cool, but a little bit more effort than is necessary. Natural language mediators, these are the things we oftentimes use. If it sounds like something, if it rhymes with something, you've used this. And all of these things are examples of mnemonics. A mnemonic is just simply a memory trick. And generally the best type of memory tricks are the ones that they make sense, but they don't make sense at the same time. They stand out. Maybe they're silly. They make sense to you. You explain it to somebody else, they look at you like you're crazy. Okay, but looking at the some of the mnemonics that are here, Roy G. Biv, I.O., PEMDAS, porn from earlier in this lesson. Okay, all of these things, or SAME, sensory afferent motor efferent. PONS, spelled with a few Z's at the end. All of those, okay, outside of the context of the class and the subject don't make a lot of sense. But in context, they do. They stand out a little bit and help you.